Hello, my friends. Amber likes to claim that she has several different disorders and mental illnesses. And along with that, she likes to describe different symptoms that she suffers from. And the more she talks about these symptoms and these disorders, the more I'm convinced that she simply Googles the disorder, kind of sees the titles for each of the symptoms, or maybe skims a little bit, and then gets on a video and explains what these things are with such bravado as to be somebody who is experiencing these things. But almost always, she's wrong. She's describing them incorrectly. So it makes it hard to believe that she's actually experiencing these things. Because if she is, she's experiencing something else than what she's describing. And we're going to go over some examples in this video because it has been going on for a while, and it's clear to me, now this is just my opinion, this is just my guess, and none of this is meant to be any kind of medical advice, but it's clear to me she just likes the attention that she gets from suffering from stuff, you know, all that sympathy that she's addicted to. So let's just go over some of the symptoms that she has described in recent memory that she just got wrong. So if you'd like and subscribe, that would literally be hectic. I'm not gonna lie. So I remember the first time she said something that made me think, I don't think she knows what she's talking about. And that's when she first kind of mentioned dissociation. Of course, she calls it disassociation, but we'll just let that slide for this video. And Amber really didn't mention dissociation until at one point Beck mentioned that they had kind of felt like they had dissociated and felt like they had checked out when Amber was making them film and things like that.
Oh yeah, all the red flags seemed obvious after the fact, after I sat and watched from an outside perspective myself completely shut down, disassociate, and I was so detached from the YouTube world. I didn't read comments, I didn't watch reaction channels. I was just in the videos from time to time.
And then Amber all of a sudden started saying, oh yeah, I've disassociated my whole life. But in this clip, she actually kind of explains what she feels when she experiences dissociation.
So I actually had my therapy appointment on Monday, and we haven't started the DBT section of it all because she's still just trying to get to know me and stuff like that. And we talked a lot about my disassociation, when it started and all of that type of stuff. So it's honestly really scary for me. I'm not gonna lie. It started when I was a little girl. It happens when I'm in high stress situations. It feels like I am just watching myself from the outside. It's like life is happening to me and there's nothing I could do about it. And it's scary. I feel detached from my body.
She's describing an out-of-body experience. Now, there is kind of an extreme case where you might feel an out-of-body experience as a trauma response, but that's what's called a depersonalization or derealization disorder. And it says, depersonalization disorder is characterized by feeling detached from one's life, thoughts, and feelings. People with this type of disorder say that they feel distant and emotionally unconnected to themselves, as if they are watching a character in a boring movie. It also says they can lose their memory and things like that. And I will tell you, that was the only time Amber actually described dissociation as an out-of-body experience. And we'll get to some other descriptions here in just a minute. But I think this kind of helps to prove that the way Amber operates when she's talking about disorders and stuff is she hears dissociation, and in her, not to be mean, but simple mind, she thinks she understands what that word means. She thinks dissociation kind of sounds like maybe my mind is away from my body, so I'll just assume it's that. Because I don't think she's describing an actual experience she's had. I think she's describing what she thinks she understands from seeing it on the internet or hearing it on the internet or hearing Beck say it. And there's also dissociative identity disorder, which we will get to towards the end of the video, I promise. Because Amber has mentioned splitting And oddly enough, splitting is a thing in BPD, but it is not what she described. But generally speaking, in the scenarios that Amber is describing, dissociation would look more like just shutting down, just kind of checking out and not being aware of your surroundings and not having any memory of what just happened because you were checked out. And remember, the out of body experience description was the only time I could find where she used that description for her dissociation. Most of the time, she just kind of uses it however it will fit her narrative in the moment. There was a video where she had a what she calls major health scare, which she thought it was a UTI and it ended up being something else, but nothing ever came of it, right? Because of course it didn't. But in that video, she's basically saying, I'm currently in a dissociative state, and I really like it here. It's better for me to be in this dissociative state than not, because if I wasn't dissociating right now, I might have a real hard time with my life.
And I actively feel myself disassociating. Right now, I just feel numb. I feel completely numb. And I know that if I wasn't in this like numb space, then I would be bawling my eyes out right now. But I think I feel safer in this weird disassociative area.
So clearly, she is just sort of making it up as she goes along. Because at first, she describes an out-of-body experience, but then other times she describes it as just kind of a cool place to be whenever she's feeling anxious. You know, I'm just going to dissociate for a bit. It'll be fine. I just think she has sort of warped the meaning as she goes because she doesn't really experience it. She doesn't really know what she's talking about. And maybe I'm crazy, but it doesn't really feel like much of a trauma response if you're able to think through it and decide, I like this. I think I'm going to keep having this trauma response. Some other things she likes to talk about are the different types of trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And just as a side note, fight, flight, and freeze are instinctive things that everybody deals with when they're faced with any kind of danger or trauma. It is not unique to people with disorders or anything like that. It is every single human being has a fight or flight or freeze response to danger. Fawn is sort of considered a learned response, and it's generally used by people who have traumatic family circumstances or something like that. And I would bet that Amber has read that. And when she talks about fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, she sort of treats them like I kind of just decide what one I want to use in the moment, depending on who's talking to me. But she does like to say that she is a fawner. She does a lot of fawning.
I do a lot of fawning.
So when she defines fawning, she's not wrong.
In psychology, fawning is a trauma response where individuals try to appease or placate others, often to avoid conflict or potential harm.
It is a trauma response. Now keep that in mind. It is a trauma response. And we'll get to that in a second. Where individuals excessively prioritize the needs and desires of others to avoid conflict and potential abandonment. The problem is, it is a trauma response. It is not something that you decide to do. A trauma response is an automatic, survival-based reaction to a perceived threat involving physiological and psychological changes that can become ingrained after an event. And of course, it says the primary responses are fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. So I am still convinced that Amber just Googled trauma response and read through these a little bit, kind of gave a little skim, and has just been using that without actually experiencing it or having any real idea what it means. Because, yeah, she defined it correctly, but listen to the way she describes how she experiences fawning and just trauma responses in general.
Genuinely, my aunt has made me backtrack in my mental health. My immediate reaction was my fight or flight, like in the beginning, was fight. You guys saw it yourself.
And what she's claiming is her fight, I assume, was when she said, come on my live stream and we'll talk about it. You know, she basically told Tammy, square up and let's talk about this because, you know, I've got the receipts or whatever. And I'm assuming that's what she's saying is her fight. And when Tammy called in, she was kind of snarky and kind of being a turd. But then she says this.
I literally felt it in my body. I'm like, okay, so it's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, right? I immediately felt my body start to fawn. And I was telling myself, oh my God, I'm just like, no matter what she says, if it's a lie, if it's a load of shit, I'm just going to nod my head. I'm just going to agree. I don't know if I could do these reactions anymore. I'm just gonna let it be what it can be.
So she decided to fawn. After feeling her body start to fawn, I'm not sure what that means exactly. I mean, I guess you could feel it in your body. I don't know, but she thought it through and decided that fawning was the right move for this scenario.
I'm just going to agree.
That is not how that works. A trauma response is something that just happens. You don't really think it through. But because she is quirky, unique, and super special and super smart, she needs you to think that it's not something that's out of her control. She wants you to think that she is so cool and so amazing that she decided to fawn, that there was no other force at work other than just her exceptional mind deciding that fawning is the correct trauma response for this moment. That's not how that works, you know? And she even made it sound like when she said, okay, so you've got fight, flight, freeze, or fawn.
I'm like, okay, so it's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, right?
Almost like she was going, okay, which would be best in this moment? That's kind of the vibe that she's giving, is that she decided to think back at all of the trauma responses she could pick from, and fawn was the one. But I don't think she was fawning at all. I think she just didn't know what to say, because when she's actually put on the spot and she doesn't have time to think of a story or of a lie or of some sort of quirky explanation for everything she does, she freezes up. That's my guess. But the dissociation and the fawning sort of pale in comparison to another thing she said recently, actually in this same live stream, where she claimed that she was, quote unquote, splitting.
This is the real Amberlynn, because it's like, bro, what you're seeing is me split. It's called splitting. When you literally turn into someone that you're not, like, you're so hurt by someone, like when you have BPD, you're so fucking hurt by someone that you genuinely, you're so overwhelmed with emotion, like you cannot regulate those. So that is what you're witnessing when you literally turn into someone that you're not.
The way she makes it sound is that she's got what's called DID, dissociative identity disorder, which is another one of those extreme dissociative disorders, kind of like the derealization or depersonalization disorders. So as you see here, it says dissociative identity disorder, formerly known as multiple personality disorder, involves switching to other identities. You may feel as if you have two or more people talking or living inside your head. You may feel like you're possessed by other identities. Each identity may have a unique name, personal history, and features. These identities sometimes include differences in voice, gender, mannerisms, and even such physical qualities as the need for eyeglasses. There also are differences in how familiar each identity is with the others. Dissociative identity disorder usually also includes bouts of amnesia and often includes times of confused wandering. DID has become pretty well known on the internet, especially because there was a period where a lot of people on TikTok were pretending to have DID.
We have a non-human alter in our system. He is a child. Hi, I'm Lunar.
I'm I don't know my role yet. I'm new. I'm Candy. I'm the trauma holder.
And it was clearly just people trying to get attention. Very few of the people that were making DID seem fun and cool actually had it. You know, maybe none of them. But that's kind of why DID has become so well known lately on the internet. But DID is exactly what Amber is describing when she says,
It's called splitting. When you literally turn into someone that you're not.
but like I said, there is actually a thing called splitting in BPD. And splitting really isn't even a clinical term. It's not really all that substantiated. It's kind of just a term that they use for one of the BPD diagnosing criteria, basically. When somebody kind of shifts from idealization of somebody to extreme devaluation. In other words, they will see somebody as all good sometimes and then all bad sometimes, kind of compartmentalize. It says splitting serves as a defense mechanism for those with BPD, helping them manage feelings of anxiety, fear, and uncertainty by categorizing experiences and people into good or bad boxes. It simplifies complex emotions and situations that might otherwise be overwhelming. So it is a thought process or sort of a way of perceiving the world and people around you. It says splitting provides a temporary respite from overwhelming emotions. By categorizing situations into simple binaries, one can momentarily alleviate the anxiety and fear associated with complex emotional experiences. So it's just they simplify things to make it easier to not get overwhelmed when they're dealing with heightened emotional experiences. And I actually spoke to a therapist friend of mine, and they said that it's not that everybody with BPD does this or has this criteria, but it is common enough that it is generally associated with BPD. But again, it's not a clinical term. It's mostly just a way to describe one of the criteria of BPD. So this is yet another example of how it seems as though Amberlynn just reads something on the internet, hears splitting, and is not telling us what her experience is. She's telling us what she thinks that word means. Because if she was actually going to therapy and a therapist was telling her how this stuff was working, or if she was actually experiencing these things, she would be able to describe it properly. At least sometimes, you know. The only time I've heard her get something right was when she was reading the definition for fawning. And here's where things get a little bit interesting. Because when you read this, it kind of sounds like Amberlynn. And this is still talking about splitting, okay? In relationships, one may perceive a partner as perfect and later as entirely flawed, often due to minor disagreements or misunderstandings. This pattern can lead to frequent and intense arguments, leaving both parties feeling confused and hurt. The perception of betrayal can be particularly pronounced, with minor issues blown out of proportion, leading to significant emotional fallout. Now, that sounds like what just happened with Emily and Amber. Because even after Emily did her tell-all, Amber was still trying to defend her sometimes and was still kind of kissing her ass. And so you might kind of picture that Amber thinks that Emily's perfect and lies for her and keeps their relationship secret and all that stuff. And then as soon as she finds out that Emily's about to come forward with some information, she comes out and says she's horrible, she's toxic, she's abusive, and everything else. And all of this was due to what I would consider pretty minor disagreements. I mean, relatively speaking. Amber made it seem like it was the worst betrayal on earth.
Betrayal, 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 betrayal.
But all it ended up being was that Emily was talking to haters and had a Tumblr where she was looking at some inappropriate pictures of women who were bigger than Amber, apparently.
She would look at me dead ass in the eyes and say, oh, this is someone I work with. It was a hater who despised me. So when she let me go through her phone, she didn't know that I could go to her screen time and see the apps that she was on. She was on Tumblr looking at naked women bigger than me.
So on the surface, this can kind of sound like Amber might be splitting. Let me give you a hypothesis for what I think is actually happening here. I think Emily is as manipulative as Amber is. Because, first of all, she was looking at inappropriate pictures of women to begin with. And it's pretty clear it was just because she's into that kind of thing. But the question is, why was she doing it with Amber right there? And I know Amber thinks she's real clever looking at the screen time, like a super sleuth finding what apps Emily was on. But Emily knew that was going to happen. If she hands Amber her phone, she knows Amber's going to look and see what app she's got. And you know, Emily was looking at Tumblr a minute before that. So I think Emily had every intention of making sure Amber knew that she was looking at those pictures. Why would she do that? I think it's because that was a way for Emily to sort of get into Amber's head subliminally and make Amber think, if I were bigger, maybe she wouldn't want to look at these other women. Maybe she would like me better if I were bigger. It makes sense that Emily would want that, first of all, because it's clear she's into that. And I can see Emily being that manipulative. And that doesn't mean that Amber's the victim in all this. I think they are both perpetrators. But I think that explains their relationship better than splitting. And some other common scenarios where splitting shows up in relationships include the self-image and identity fluctuations, which on the surface can also sound kind of like Amber, but I think her self-image is more in line with narcissism than anything else, because I think she's got a low self-image and she is trying to always act like she doesn't, you know. This right here, it says, friends or family members might be seen as entirely supportive one day and completely unsupportive the next. And that kind of makes sense, except for Amber does that to them. She pushes them away. She makes them frustrated by just being a turd to them and either ignoring them or only communicating with them if she wants something. So it's not that she is perceiving them as supportive and then unsupportive. She is kind of making them be that way because they get tired of dealing with her shit, you know? And so they will try to be supportive until they get tired of dealing with her, and then they stop being supportive. So it's not a perception thing, it's actually happening. So she clearly does not understand what splitting is. She described it completely wrong. And I'm not convinced that splitting is something that she actually does anyway. Even if she were to describe it correctly, I don't think it's something that she deals with. So just like splitting, when she tries to describe dissociation or fawning or basically any kind of symptom that she's supposedly feeling or any kind of disorder she supposedly has, it's pretty clear she doesn't know what she's talking about. So at the very least, I think this is a strong indicator that she is not, and maybe has never been, in any kind of meaningful therapy where she could actually learn the terms that she would need to know if she was dealing with this kind of stuff. I think this just shows that she loves the attention, and by Googling it or, you know, asking ChatGPT about it, she can then take the little buzzwords and spout them off like she knows what she's talking about. And I guess her little babies believe it, but those of us who understand how much of a liar she is and how much she needs attention and sympathy, it's pretty obvious that she just talks out of her ass most of the time. And so when we talk about how she's not in therapy, and when she talks about therapy and we say she's lying, it's not just because we hate her. It's not just because we have decided she can do no right. It's because you can just tell she's making this stuff up. You can tell she doesn't know what she's talking about because she's not speaking from experience. She's speaking in buzzwords. And I don't know that it's necessarily lying. And I know that sounds crazy, but I think Beck said it best when they said that Amber kind of convinces herself that she's got all these things.
She never admitted to lying about a disorder, but I think that's because she genuinely believes that she has every single one that she says she has. She would self-diagnose constantly based on how she felt and a few Google searches.
She looks up symptoms and reads them and decides that sounds like her and runs with it. And we know she's not in face-to-face therapy. She has to be doing it online because she admitted she just doesn't leave the house other than maybe once a week with her mom.
If I'm being quite frank, I only see my mom once a week. It is on Saturdays.
That's it. She leaves the house on Saturdays and the rest of the week she is doing nothing, sitting on her ass, probably eating, doing nothing all by herself all the time. So the only option she could be doing is online therapy. And I don't think she would put in the effort or the work to find a good therapist, somebody other than BetterHelp. And also, she probably needs far more than just an online once a week or twice a week therapy session. You know what I mean? I think she needs, at the very least, face-to-face therapy so that she can actually figure out what's going on with her, rather than just Googling it and making it up as she goes. But anyway, it's not like anything's gonna change. She's gonna do this forever. Once there's a new buzzword, once there's a new disorder that she thinks could get her some sympathy, she'll start saying she has that too. So I'm not sure what it's gonna be, but it'll be interesting to see. Anyway, I appreciate you guys so much. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.